microphone for our YouTube channel as well. Cool. So welcome to our stress management workshop. We'll get straight into it. We'll share some resources as we go through the workshop as well. If you have any questions, feel free to ask as we go along as well. You can write in the chat box if you have a question throughout too. Cool. So we will start by talking about what stress actually is, and how it kind of forms, what happens, the different types of stress, what happens in our brain and body, and then we'll move on to ways we can cope with stress and some techniques that we can use if you are experiencing stress. So what happens to cause stress is our brain decides that something is wrong or something is bad. This is something that can impact us in a negative way, might have a bad consequence for us. This can be something that is a real threat, whether it's something that is actually bad happening to us, or it's something that we perceive. So for whatever reason, our brain, our body, us, we have decided that this event or issue is worth stressing over. So we have different types of stress that can form. The first is eustress, which you might not have heard of before, but this is a stress that is actually good. Eustress means that we care. It's what keeps us motivated. It means that something's important to us. An example of eustress might be being nervous before your sports game or something like that. This is kind of short bursts of stress that kind of keeps us motivated, that passionate about it, might be a little bit of nerves, but not at the point where it's sabotaging us, where we're so stressed or anxious that we can't perform. It's just a little bit of changes in our body that means that we really care about this. Bursts of eustress keep our life exciting, keep us motivated, keep us caring about things. This is a healthy, good kind of stress that we should all experience. If we don't have any eustress, our life is flat, our life is dull. So eustress and stress can actually help us perform better, to be motivated and caring about things that are going on in our life. The next phase is de-stress. This is when it starts to cause a negative impact on us. We might start to have a lot of negative thought processes. The level of stress that we can feel in our body might get a little bit unbearable at this stage. Again, everyone experiences de-stress and it's normal, but at the same time, it can start to make our lives harder. It can start to impact our health, our mental health as well. If we go with too much de-stress and we're exposed to distress for long periods of time, this can start to lead to burnout. So burnout forms from an exposure to too much distress. We are going to do our next workshop all about burnout, so I won't spend too much time on it today. But I did just want to talk quickly about it. I have this book that is Simple Ways to Take Control of Your Life, Smart Moves by Tia Angelos, who is the CEO of the Smart Women Society. I will just share a link to this book because I'm going to reference it a few times today, and it's a really great book just on like how to do life. It goes over like communication, boundaries, budgeting, and how you can kind of apply these things to a professional setting as well. I'm just pasting a link to it in the chat box. So it talks about on one of the pages effects of burnout, and some of these symptoms are like lack of enthusiasm, constant exhaustion, vulnerability to illness, headaches and other physical side effects, decreased productivity and output of work, neglecting personal care needs and important commitment, low job satisfaction and employer loyalty, making mistakes more often, difficulty sleeping, prolonged negative attitude and cynicism, feeling frustrated, overwhelmed and anxious, reduced creativity. So you know, maybe you have been through burnout before, but as you can kind of tell by some of these effects and symptoms, this isn't something that we want. We do not want to get burnt out. So as life happens and we all experience de-stress, it's really important for us to learn strategies to manage this and strategies to cope when we're distressed so that we don't get burnt out. As well. So no one wants burnout, but we can kind of prevent it if we deal with distress effectively, which is what we're going to focus on today. The other type of stress that we can experience is post-traumatic stress. Again, the symptoms can be a little bit different, and this is when the stressful event, the adverse event, the trauma happens in the past, and we continue to experience stress in our body because we're re-experiencing. We might have intrusive memories or intrusive thoughts about the past event, nightmares, flashbacks, and this re-experiencing of the post the event, post the stress, causes stress in our body again. So that isn't what we're focusing on today. And again, that could be a whole workshop in itself. What we're focusing on is de-stress and knowing how to cope with that to prevent some of these other things from happening. So what happens in our brain and our body when we are stressed? So it starts in our brain. And what happens is there is a limbic system, which is kind of deep inside our brain at the bottom. And part of that system identifies whether there is a threat. And it kind of communicates or sends a warning signal to the rest of our brain that all our energy might need to go into survival. The problem is that our response to stress and triggers hasn't changed since like caveman days, and our response to stress is very suited to like running from a bear, being in a pack and having that more like physical threat in the wild, whereas modern day stressors might be giving a speech or a relationship or something like that, when being in fight, flight, freeze mode is actually sabotaging us, not helping us survive. So this is something to be mindful of, that when we get stressed, if we don't intervene, our brain and body will automatically go into this fight or flight system, which can actually sabotage us dealing with the situation more effectively, just because we're primed for this survival from back in the day, where our threats are a lot different now. So the amygdala, which is part of the limbic system, tells our brain, hey, there's something wrong here. We might need to panic. We might need to go into survival mode. And it tells all of our brain, body system to focus on that. And it shuts down the things that might not be necessary for fighting, flying, or freezing. So full survival mode through our body. It changes our heart rate, our blood pressure, and if we confirm that, yes, we are going into this fight flight mode, there is a problem, we do need to prime ourselves for survival, it actually shuts down the other areas of our brain. Again, this is quite self-sabotaging, because those outer regions of our brain that can shut down is what makes us human. It's our ability to think abstract, to be creative, problem solving. So we can see if we had a modern day stressor, like navigating a difficult relationship, and our whole rest of our brain shuts down other than fighting or running away, how this could be a problem for us. So this is something that we need to be aware of, to notice in ourselves when our amygdala sends that symptom and we start to feel like we're going into that panic, fight or flight. Is there something that's helpful for us? Can we regulate our system so that we can turn back on the rest of our brain to be more logical, to be able to problem solve a bit better, and use our full advantage as a human being to deal with our stress and deal with our problems? Again, being in stress for long periods of time, being in that fight or flight mode, can have really serious impacts on your health. It shuts down your digestive system. So we either have fight or flight or rest and digest. If you can imagine that you were running from a bear, you didn't need to digest meals at that time. So anything that's kind of useless to fighting or freezing just gets shut off. So it can, if you imagine when we've changed our blood pressure or our heart rate, the way that our body functions, shut off our digestive system. If we stay in this state for extended periods of time, chronic health conditions can happen. There's so much research out there that stress can cause cancer, heart attacks, strokes, as well as all of these mental health issues too. So we need to know that stress can harm us if we don't deal with it properly. If we send out these messages that we're going into fight and flight mode and we don't regulate our system and don't give us a chance to learn how to deal with stress in other ways than our basic survival system, that can be kind of biologically ingrained in us from survival days as cavemen, that we can actually start to get sick and start to have a lot of problems in our life. This system was designed to respond to one-off threats, to be in it for an hour and then it shut down and go back to normal. But when we have chronic stress in our life, modern day stresses, ongoing stresses, we can find ourselves in that survival mode for extended period of time. This happens with burnout, this happens with post-traumatic stress disorder as well, and we can start to see why all those scary burnout symptoms can start to happen to us if we don't deal with stress properly. The vagus nerve, I will just put in the chat box a little bit more information about our brain system in response to stress, in case anyone's interested in learning more about that. The vagus nerve is kind of the opposite system. So we have our parasympathetic nervous system and our sympathetic nervous system. The vagus nerve is like a key to unlock that. It's a giant nerve that runs through our body from like our brain, and a lot of the nerve endings are around your hips. Things like yoga and Tai Chi can unlock this nervous system, put us into that rest and digest, which then allows us to use all the other areas of our brain to cope better and to deal with the situation. It stops our heart pounding and our stomachs turning. So again, this is important to know in terms of our brain and our body's reaction to stress. We have this system that kind of sends us into panic mode, but we have a system that calms us back down as well. I will again put a link in there about the vagus nerve and its role in our stress response, in case that's something that you want to learn more about as well. So as we can see, our brain decides there's a threat. We can either go into panic mode or we can regulate our nervous system. If we stay in panic mode too long, this impacts our digestive system and it causes, because of the changes in our body, bad physical and mental health outcomes. We can't control a lot of the time what stress we are exposed to. Sometimes these just are things that are happening around us. However, we can pay attention to our brains and our body, regulate ourselves and learn healthy techniques to deal with the stress that we all have. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to the next slide? Cool, I will keep going. Okay, so like the workshop that we did, we're kind of going to follow that CBT model where our thoughts impact our feelings, which then impact our behavior. And we're going to talk about some things that we can do in each of these categories that are going to help us combat distress. The first is our thoughts. So again, it's our brain and it's our thoughts that send us into the fight or flight mode or not. It's often our thoughts that can catastrophize events to make it worse, to make it more stressful, or can help us deal with it and be logical while we solve our stress and cope with stress around us. Some things that we can do to work on our thought processes is journaling, getting all your thoughts down. We have billions of thoughts just circling our brain every day, and it's important that we have awareness of what these thoughts are. Journaling positive thoughts on purpose, like what am I grateful for? What am I looking forward to? What am I proud of? Also meditation, where we can kind of clear our minds, slow down these thoughts, again, regulate our nervous system, is going to help us. So the first thing I guess we're going to look at is, where are my thoughts are? Is this making it worse, making me more stressed, or is it priming me to deal with the situation effectively? Some things that you can consider when looking in your thought process is, what strengths or resources do I have to deal with this situation? And internal means like your own personal strengths. It could be your values, your knowledge, your skills, or external, which might be asking for someone to help, or just resources that you can go to help with your situation. Something else we can consider is this really going to matter 5 to 10 years from now? If you are that stressed that you can't function, you can't sleep, you can't eat, and you can't cope, is this worth that amount of stress? Have you catastrophized the event? Are you feeling just really stuck in the moment that you're in? 5 to 10 years from now, however the situation resolves or works out, is that going to matter? It's just something to ask yourself, to put the situation into perspective, and thinking about, do you have control over this as well? So some examples, again, out of the book I mentioned before, of things we can control is like what we choose to believe, what we choose to feel, how we choose to think, our actions and decisions, and how we take actions. This is where our energy needs to go, because this is the difference that we can make. Things that we can't control is our past experiences, other people's mindsets and opinions, unexpected events, other people's behaviors and reactions, and how the world changes around us. So there is things that we will have stress because of something we can't control, but we need to come back to what we can control, which is how we react and how we deal with it. Does anyone have any questions before we keep moving forward? Cool. So we're moving on to our feeling and our emotional part of stress. Everyone here probably would have been in the fight-flight mode before and knows how intense that can feel in your body when you do start to panic, or you do start to have a big fright, or how exhausting it is to be in this state for extended periods of time. This is about how we can kind of deal with that and cope and comfort ourselves when we are going through those difficult emotions. The first thing that we can start with is to create some acceptance and space to feel uncomfortable feelings. We don't have to be happy all the time. It's not possible for us to be happy all the time. It is okay to let out difficult emotions, to be in the space where you can just hold yourself while you feel those difficult emotions. The feelings isn't going to hurt us. We can sit with it and increase our tolerance to feel difficult feelings, knowing that it's not forever, knowing that we're not going to be stuck in this emotion. We are going to go through stressful events, and we are going to feel difficult emotions at different points in our life, and that's okay. Something else that can help us is mindfulness. So this, again, is coming back to the present moment, where we're not anxious about how things are going to turn out or what we're going to do. We're not dwelling on past experiences. We're just there as we are in that present moment, coming back to our body, coming back to our breath, coming back to our feelings, and just being in that moment. I'm going to post some mindfulness exercises, just some ideas to get you started. If you Google mindfulness exercises or look on YouTube, there are so many things out there that you can try. Try and find 1 or 2 of these things that work really well for you, so that you have that to go to kind of comfort yourself when you are going through difficult emotions. I'm just reading the question in the chat box. So coping with anxiety aside from seeing a psychologist. different age groups? How do we identify stress in people or staff, and how can we leverage if it is a good stress? That's a really great question. So I guess good stress makes us productive, it makes us motivated and makes a good outcome for us. De-stress will have negative impacts on our life. It might start a negative thought process. It might start really, prolonged, bad, uncomfortable feelings, and it will be maladaptive. It will stop us from doing things or make it really hard for us to do things that we need to do. And you might notice that by someone being down or flat, or someone having changes of behavior, someone avoiding, calling in sick, all these types of things. Ways that we can deal with anxiety. So anxiety is stress or worry thoughts about the future, about how things are going to turn out. It might be worrying if people like you, worrying if you're going to do a good job, worrying if you're going to keep the things that you have. So knowing that mindfulness, again, is going to help. A lot of these coping strategies that we're talking about in stress, because anxiety is sort of a kind of stress, will help deal with that as well. There is a lot of self-help exercises, books to read, podcasts to listen to if you do not want to see a psychologist directly. There is also, I guess, different kinds of anxiety disorders, and if it doesn't resolve itself and it's ongoing, I would suggest seeing somebody about it just to have that specific help you need for your individual situation of anxiety as well. Cool. Yes, so good stress can kind of turn to bad stress if we don't have that capacity to cope. To help other people, probably suggesting to them to get help, validating their emotions. It's okay to be stressed. It makes sense that you're going through this right now. It sounds really hard. Just validating their feelings, validating their experience, opening up for them to talk about it and share what exactly is on their mind without making any assumptions, and then asking them what is their ways to cope, what's going to help you right now, how would you like me to support you, what kind of self-care or comfort things do you have in your life that might be beneficial to you right now as well. Great questions. Cool. So mindfulness, self-care, which I mentioned just before, this is really important. We all know that we should be doing self-care, but we need to have this as part of our daily habit routines, that we have that moment where we can kind of switch off from the stress and do something that is helpful for us. I can't tell you what your self-care should be, but you should have something. For some people, it might be taking a long bath. For some people, it might be going out and getting their nails done. But for some people, it might be journaling, or it might just be sitting in silence, or things like that, that we do to just help ourselves cope, to love ourselves, to offer ourselves support, offer ourselves a break. And we need to do this regularly. We have stress all through our day, regularly, all the time. So it makes sense that we need to do self-care every day as well to combat that. We need a balance. We can't just be dealing with stress and going and working and caring for everyone else without stopping and giving back to ourselves in those moments as well. Pleasurable activities. This is really important, and I'm going to share a list with you, is that we all have something that we can go to that brings us joy, that lights us up, that we look forward to, that is fun. For some of us, it might be yoga or sport or craft or music or anything like that. But we have activities that we can enjoy. We're not just working, we're not just doing the things we have to do, we're not just dealing with the stressful things, we're doing things that actually make life worth living for us, and that is fun for us as well. Laughing is also a good way to activate the vagus nerve too. So it is important that we can just have fun and have things that we look forward to and enjoy all the time, not just when things are going well. Having comfort. So this might be a show that you watch. It might be a pet that you have. But we have these like emotional comfort things. It might be calling your sister or your mum or something like that. But when we are sad or we're hurting because something has gone on for us, that we have those things that can kind of help us feel a little bit better, and emotionally just comfort us in that moment, as well. Having a support network, so people that you can kind of consult and talk to. Breathing exercises. So this is really important because when we are about to go into flight mode, or that system has been activated, breathing is probably the quickest, easiest way to just swap it back. It helps us with anxiety. It helps us just regulate so that we can think clearer and deal with the situation better. Everyone should have their kind of go-to exercises that works for them, in terms of breathing. Some people like breathe in for a shorter number of seconds that they breathe out for. I like a strategy called box breathing, where you kind of go around in the square and you breathe in for like 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, and then hold it again for 4 seconds, and it's like a square with 4 seconds each. But find any sort of breathing strategy. It might be that diaphragm breathing, anything that works for you, and practice it and use it regularly to just stay regulated, to stop that kind of survival mode being activated, to combat the stress that you're dealing with throughout the day. Grounding exercises. So again, this is something that will help with anxiety too. And the whole purpose of grounding is that it brings you to the present moment. It is about being in the here and now. So one grounding strategy is like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 with your senses. So you start with like 5 things you can see, and you can just label them in your head: computer, desk, chair, curtains, etc. 4 things you can hear, so you're really listening. You might hear wind or the aircon or a noise in the background, and you move through what you can feel, taste, smell, touch. And that is just a really short exercise that only takes like a minute. You can do it in your head when nobody is kind of noticing, and it's just bringing you away from all the worries, all the difficult thoughts, all the difficult feelings into the present moment, as well. Doing exercise as well, moving your body, is going to help too. So I would suggest like developing a 3-step sequence, starting with breath to just kind of switch back into that like rest state. Then you might do a grounding exercise and then some kind of mindfulness, or you might say 3 things in your head that you're grateful for. But maybe list just like 3 strategies you go to when you start to feel distress. You breathe, you do your grounding exercise, you say what you're grateful for, or you say a positive affirmation, or whatever it is that works for you. And you practice that when you start to get triggered, when you start to get distressed, and to keep you regulated throughout the day as well. Onto our actions. So these are some things that we can just do throughout the day that will help us cope and deal with stress. Daily habits include kind of having that self-care in your routine. So it might have a cup of tea when you wake up, it might be doing yoga, it might be journaling. Your daily habits are helpful and healthy and supportive for you. Taking breaks regularly to be away from the stress, to calm down, to do a pleasurable activity. Stimulation breaks. So a lot of the day we're stimulated by noise, kids, computer screens, all these different things. So to have that time out where there's no other noise or no other things in our space, we're not being touched, and we can just have that break where it's quiet to calm down, is important as well. Maintaining boundaries with people in our life so that we can have self-care, that we aren't exposing ourselves to stress that we don't need to, which effective and assertive communication can come in to maintain those boundaries and to tell people what we need. We're being realistic in our scheduling. We're not allocating every 5 minutes of our day to do all these big things without taking into consideration what we're going to have energy for. Sometimes, like, planning to be healthy can actually stress ourselves out more because we've done, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and this, and completely change my whole life by tomorrow. And then we start to feel like we failed, or we're trying to pressure ourselves to do something that's unrealistic. Small daily habits and stacking them and building it, slow, gradual changes is going to be more helpful. And we're utilizing support and delegation. Can we ask the kids to help us set the table, or, delegating things in your work and stuff like that, so that we're not doing everything ourselves and taking on more than we need to as well. So something to remember here is that stress impacts our whole body. It includes our physical health, and our mental health can be impacted by stress and how we respond to stress. So we need to be holistic in the way we manage it. So stress is stored in our body. It impacts our mental health, our physical health, our digestive system. So we need to move our body, look after our bodies, exercise, diet, have mental health support to combat stress. Here is some techniques that we can use to work on stress, just some daily things that we can do. So having a healthy sleeping pattern, if that's something you struggle with, get help as well. We need sleep to be able to deal with stress and to be in that rest and digest state. Reducing caffeine and alcohol, particularly if we're going through a stressful time in our lives. We might instead take some vitamins, supplements, protein in order to fuel our body and energize ourselves in a healthy way. Moving your body to get that stress out of you, getting outside insight into your problems. Sometimes we catastrophize things and we're just stuck in our own mental state. Saying it out loud to someone else and hearing their insight might help put things into perspective. Regulating your nervous system before we make any big decisions, so we know that we're not reacting out of fight and flight, that we're planning and organizing and problem solving in a more reasonable state of mind. Find your pack. We are primed to be pack animals. Have that support network around you. Knowing your limits and your warning signs. So what is the amount of stress that you can deal with before it starts to become a problem? What's the warning signs that you might be leaning in towards burnout, or you're not coping very well? And getting that professional support if it persists as well. Some take-home messages. So stress is stored in our body. It impacts us in lots of different ways. We need physical, mental, and emotional strategies to overcome stress. The healthier we are physically and mentally, the better able we are to deal with stress. We need regular daily habits of stress management. So this means that we're kind of accepting that our lives are stressful. There's busyness, there's triggers, there's things we have to deal with, but we do that regular self-care, regular caring for our health, and we're priming ourselves the best we can to deal with it. And if we can't, and these problems keep happening, or we're really becoming impacted by stress, that's when we can ask for professional support as well. So thoughtful movement and what we do, we have our centre opened up in Aspley, where we have a psychologist, dietitian, and exercise physio working holistically. We do personal training, we have these monthly workshops, and we work telehealth and face-to-face as well. There's different ways that you can access our services, including in Medicare healthcare plans, NDIS, DVA Gold Card holders, and through our EAP program, which is where the employer or company signs up for their team to use our services as well. So if you would like to work more on some of these things, or have that one-on-one support in any of these areas of your life, then get in contact with us, because our team is here to support you. Does anyone have any final questions before we wrap up? What I will do is put the recording on YouTube. We have some of our other previous workshops on there as well. And next month we are focusing on burnout. So if you have gotten to that stage where you're having a lot of those symptoms from ongoing stress, then we can work through that burnout in particular next month as well. No worries. Well, thank you guys. Thanks for coming along. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. There is links to our burnout workshop in the chat box. And if anyone has any kind of questions or comments, then feel free to jump in as well.